Hello, and welcome to my lecture series on multicultural communication. You're with Dr. Marquita Byrd, or as my students call me, aka Dr. B. This is one of a series of videos or shows that I'm hoping will help us as a nation to live better together. So my first goal is to help us to understand our multicultural society. My second goal is to help us to develop communication skills that will allow us to live better in this society. Now, when I say learn more about our diverse society, learn about who we are as a country. Learn about the diversity that exists in our country. Learn about our policies, our goals, and learn about how we can talk to each other in a more effective way. So I'm trying to broaden our knowledge and also to help us to live our best life. We're living in the best time in human history, and we're living in the best country in the world, I think. And we need to learn how to maximize that by understanding our surroundings, understanding the people we live with, and understanding how to communicate better. I don't want to lie to you and say that communication is the answer to all problems. It's not. However, it can help us to gain better solutions to our problems. So let's talk today. Today I'm going to talk about what multicultural is and why it is important. People say, well, why are you teaching that course? In fact, there are very few universities in the nation that teach multicultural communication. So you have an opportunity to do something that most people don't do. So that's what we're doing here. I'll start out by talking about my work setting. I talked about my neighborhood as being very diverse, but also my work setting is very diverse. I came here from the Midwest, and I came here 30 years ago, where people thought we didn't have very much diversity. In fact, the school where I worked at before would not let me teach this course on a regular basis. They said, oh, you can teach it every 2 years because, we really don't have any diversity. Where are we going to, see people who are different? The fact of the matter is that they really didn't understand the nature of diversity. Diversity is not just about race. Diversity is not just about ethnicity. Diversity is about differences among human beings in general. And in the state where I live, for example, we had people who were rural, we had people who were urban. That's the difference right there in the way people communicate. I was in the state of Missouri, and in that state, there's a difference between people who live north of St. Louis and south of St. Louis, because in the Civil War, the state was divided. It was a divided state right around St. Louis. And so people who come from above St. Louis tend to think a little differently, speak a little differently than people in below St. Louis. I became aware of that when I taught in schools above St. Louis, and I taught in schools in southern Mississippi, southern Missouri. And I found that students would come from St. Louis, from Kansas City, to my school in southeast Missouri and would say, where am I? Am I in the same country? Am I in the same state? So there is diversity everywhere. Of course, there are men, there are women. On our campus, we had gay students who were just beginning to talk about their rights. So diversity exists everywhere, but sometimes people don't recognize it. Here in where I teach here in San Jose, everybody recognizes diversity because when you come here, you see people of all walks of life. I find it so exciting. My students said that I might be a bit rude because I will go up to people and say, I will start out by saying, you are so handsome or you're so beautiful, and I'm wondering what your cultural background is. And they're so excited to tell me about who they are. So they don't find it offensive in any way, and they're glad that someone wants to know about them. And I love doing that. In fact, when I early on when I came here, I was in a donut shop, and there was this little old lady, Asian-looking lady, who was at a table, and she was going on about how something had happened with her grandkids, and she had disciplined her grandkids. She was a tiny lady. She was saying about what she did, and I had to turn around because she sounded just like my grandmother. Not in language, but that attitude, that grandmother attitude, that disciplinary attitude. And I just went over to her and said, wow, I heard what you were saying is so interesting. What is your cultural background? She said, I'm Filipino. that's how I became aware of, Filipino people, and I started paying attention. Ask questions. Don't make assumptions about who people are and what they believe in. So I came here and I became very immersed in diversity. On my campus previously, we had predominantly white students, some black students. Here, I have everybody, and boy, that has improved my teaching. It's improved my teaching because I have read and become aware of various learning styles, communication styles, writing styles. This is the first time that I saw somebody write in English. And it was a student who was an Indian person, and they were writing in English, but it had a Hindu flavor to it, grammar, etc., and so forth. So that was very exciting. Of course, problematic grading, but because I want to be fair. But so I've been able to have this very diverse experience at the school where I work now. Not only that, we live in downtown. Our campus is downtown. And so we see a lot of the people who are marginalized on our campus. We have many homeless people who are in and out of our campus, in and out of our buildings, in and out of the bathrooms. We have mentally ill people on our campus because we have many group homes that house them. And so we've got to manage all of this, make sure that we give everybody dignity and also keep safe and how we can handle them. So it's a very, very diverse campus, not just among our students, but also among the community that we live in. Now, we're going to talk about what multicultural communication is. People say, well, what is that? Why are you studying that? Simply put, multicultural communication is about talking to the stranger at home. And people think, oh my gosh, what is that? Well, we get all these lessons about how to speak to the stranger abroad. We want to know more about the stranger abroad. But the fact is, we don't know the people who live next door. We don't understand the people who live next door. And so since we're interacting with each other, we are working for the same resources, those sorts of things. It'd be very good to come to understand the stranger at home, so that we can live together better. The other thing is about multicultural is that you can't get away from it. There's nowhere you can go where multicultural communication is not taking place. It is ubiquitous. Ubiquitous means it is everywhere. In every society, multicultural communication is taking place. It is omnipresent. It is always going on. For example, right now, as I'm filming this show, my filmographer is a young man who's young enough to be my grandson, probably. And so we have to negotiate through how we understand the process. I'm interested in what he's saying because he's a young person. He's just finished being a student. So he gives me that perspective in terms of how people are going to see these stories and how they're going to see these lectures. That is important to me. And I'm hoping that as we interact, he can learn from my experiences. So it's omnipresent, and multicultural is inevitable. You will be engaged in it in your lifetime. So we're talking about multicultural communication, and what it is simply coming to understand and communicate with the person, the stranger at home. When I say communicate, let's talk about what that means. Communication is simply interacting with another human being through verbal, sound, and nonverbal behavior. It's interacting with other human beings, and of course we're interacting with people who are the same and different from us all day long. So that's what multicultural is. Also, we can do things like communicate with people through our clothing. My neighbors next door, when they get ready to go to festival, they're dressed in different traditional clothes than what I would wear. And so they're communicating something to me about what their religious beliefs might be, how they see importance in their celebrations. So we can communicate with our clothing. There used to be a time, for example, when college professors dressed a certain way. And they, be the jeans and jacket. Of course, that was for the males. Women in dresses and suits. Now, very often you come on campus and you don't know who is who. And my relatives would get on me sometimes and say, oh my God, you're going to work in that? Yeah, because that's how college professors dress now. And so, yeah, things have changed, and that's great. Anything that doesn't change, anything that remains stagnant dies. And so we don't want to remain stagnant. We want to be refreshing ourselves. So that's why communication, multicultural communication is so important, because we remain vibrant as a nation. Now, we could talk about communication as being the creation and sharing of meaning, and meaning has to do with how someone interprets what you say. I just saw a news story about what people considered a racist prom proposal. I'm sure the teenagers who did that did not think it was, but it was. They held up a sign and they said something to the effect that, hey, I want to go to prom with you, even though you're different from me and you're Chicano or wetback, I still want to go to the prom with you. Then the next thing is said, I want to go to the prom with you, but even if you're an N-word they used on a poster, I still want to go to the prom with you. They thought that was really cute. The adults didn't think that was cute, and of course the students of color didn't think it was cute. So what something means to you may not be what it means to me. So we have to understand that words don't mean anything. It is the people who interpret them that give meaning to them. So communication is using our voice and our bodies in order to interact with other human beings. And now we have to add technology. My goodness gracious, we could talk about all the social media, people who are doing tweets and Instagram, Facebook, those sorts of things to connect with other human beings. So even technology shapes the way we communicate. Let me go on and talk about what is the difference between multicultural communication and intercultural communication. I get that a lot, not just from the average citizen, of course from my students, some of my faculty. We're talked about that a great deal in my department. Now, this whole study of culture and communication began in the 40s, actually, in the Department of Foreign Affairs. And they wanted to prepare government people, our federal government people who worked overseas. They wanted to prepare them, help them to learn skills, to understand culture in order to be better communicators. We didn't want our foreign people, people who worked in the Foreign Affairs Department to be what's called the ugly American. We wanted them to go there and be effective. If you want to be effective, you got to pay attention. So they started teaching them about nonverbal. They taught them about taboos, what to say and not to say. They started teaching them about how to communicate. For example, in America, when we meet someone, we give our name, our number, and our business people want to start business right away. You know, we want to start talking about what we're doing. Give them our business card, which is very impersonal. When you go to many traditional countries, they want to talk to you. Before I do business with you, I want to know who you are. And I don't want to talk business with you in our first meeting. Let's go to lunch. Let's have tea. Let's go to a festival before we start interacting. So Americans often would insult other people because they wanted to hurry and start, whereas other cultures didn't. So that's where our study of intercultural communication began. And so therefore, intercultural has to do with communication between or among people who are from different nations, different countries. For example, talking to somebody from America and Canada. I had an opportunity to visit Canada, and it is very similar to America, but it's not the same. That was intercultural. I went to Mexico. Talking to people there was intercultural, from America to Mexico, and of course we had language differences. So that's intercultural. When I went to Paris, wow, what an experience engaging in intercultural communication, because I found that people basically don't want to help you if you don't try to learn a few words of French. Doesn't that make sense? So our Foreign Affairs Department wanted to start with that, and then we developed that and call it intercultural communication. Edward Hall was a very famous person involved in that. Now, in the 21st century, we're talking about multicultural communication, because we're recognizing that even within a nation, and multicultural has to do with people who belong to the same nation, the same unit, the same geopolitical system, but may belong to various demographic groups within the nation. And we're only now talking about that. and we're not talking about it enough here in the United States. We find Canada has multicultural policies, Australia has multicultural policies, and the United Nations has a division on multicultural relationships, and they gauge that in various nations. So multicultural communication and intercultural communication are not the same thing. Intercultural, you know that eventually you're going home or that person's going home. They're not going to be here forever. Whereas when you're in a multicultural setting, these people are not going anywhere. It may be your child's teacher who is a Sikh, or who is a Muslim woman who's wearing hijab. And we've had some horrible instances of that going on right in America where people have come in and the students harass them. We may be talking to the mailman who is Vietnamese. We may be talking to the bank person who is Mexican or from somewhere from South America. It goes on, and so we have this diversity that impacts on us at all times. Now, multicultural communication, you might have gathered, is a little bit more complex than communication in general, and here's why. In multicultural communication, you have two or more people who are trying to interact with each other who, one, have different histories. You know, in high school and in grade school, we learn American history. But you know, history is written by the powerful. History is written by the people who have the guns and the money. And most of us don't have that. We have women's histories. We have children's histories. We have histories of Native Americans, histories of African Americans. All of these people have different histories in the United States, and it cannot all be written in one history book. But you're coming from different histories. People are coming in the multicultural setting with different values. For example, in putting this project together, I wanted to have this big banner made. And so I found this company that makes jumbo banners I wanted to use for a background. So I got to the company, and the gentleman was Chinese. And we had to talk about what it is I wanted. And as I was talking to them, I would ask them questions, the man who owned it and the designer. And I noticed that they were getting a little irritated. You know, like, well, why does she keep asking questions? Is she trying to challenge me? Does she think I'm stupid? And so I stopped what I was doing and I explained to them, I'm asking questions because I don't know what we're doing. And I'm hoping that you will help me to understand the process better. And so I said, you know, African Americans tend to talk loud. And so when I talk loud to you, that doesn't mean I'm angry. And doesn't mean I'm being aggressive. I'm just trying to learn. So the owner said to me, he said, yes, and when I talk to you and I talk loud, it doesn't mean that I'm angry. So when we got all that cleared out, we were great. I didn't want him to feel that I was questioning his competence and that sort of thing. And he was a little irritating at first because he would say little things. I didn't know it was joking. You know, humor changes from culture to culture. So then when I figured out he was joking, we were all right. I joked with him, he joked with me. So that's what we need to do. Talk to people, talk about how we're talking to people, because it is very, very complex. Or be able to say to someone, I'm sorry, but I'm not quite sure. I don't understand exactly what you're talking about. For example, I was at a social gathering, and I was talking to a woman who was of European descent about the things that I had to teach my sons. I talked to her about the fact that I had to teach my sons how to walk on the street and try to be safe. I had to talk to them about how they should interact with the police and try not to get killed. And she was stunned and said, I don't see why you have to talk to your children like that. I said, because they're African American males and they don't have the freedom that people of European descent have in the United States. She started crying. She started crying because she just had never thought about that. So as we come from different backgrounds, we need to talk about those things. So let me go on to say that multicultural communication can be simplified if we understand that human beings are but a variation on a theme. We look at each other and we treat each other like we're very, very different from each other. Sort of like the story Dr. Seuss wrote called The Sneetches. You should get that book for your kids. The Sneetches is a story about these mythical beings, and half of them had a clear belly, and the other half had a star on their belly. Now, the ones that had stars on their belly thought that they were the most important, and they uh, deserved all of the benefits of society, whereas the people who didn't have a star weren't special and were not given the benefit of having all the resources. Then one day something changed, and the people without the star got the star, and the other ones lost the star. Now we got a different interpretation of everything that's going on. And they had to finally come to the conclusion, hey, we're all Sneetches. Whether we have a star or not, we're still all Sneetches. We got to live in this area. We got to get food. We got to raise our kids. So let's come together. It's a fantastic book. You should get it. So today I've talked about three things. What is communication, which is important to understand? What is multicultural communication? And how multicultural and intercultural are different. I want to thank you today for being with me as we explore the nature of multicultural communication. As you can tell, it's a topic that's very dear to me. Talking about how people are the same yet different. I look at you and I can see that you're a human being. You're breathing. You're corporeal. You've got 2 feet, 2 arms, 2 hands, etc., and so forth. In those ways, we are the same, and yet we are different. Maybe we got different skin color. We got different hair texture, which mean nothing. It means nothing except how we interpret it. So this is what this series is about that I'm doing the lectures on. Today we talked about the nature of multicultural communication. I want to ask you to please check at the bottom of the video, and you will find a PowerPoint that adds to this lecture, this talk. Also outline notes in an outline. And I'll get ready to say goodbye to you today, and I hope I'll see you here next time. I want to leave you with this thought from Vulcan, spoken to us by Mr. Spock: live long and prosper.